Good morning, this is Garrett. Video blog 012. I just did a video yesterday morning at the request of a friend of mine from Ohio. He was asking what the Christian perspective is on withdrawing your kids from public schools due to safety concerns. And that is just by a little bit my longest video yet, 1 hour and 9 minutes and 49 seconds. And I did that video. This video I've got a topic picked out, but if you have any ideas for things you'd like me to cover or talk about, just shoot me a message, let me know, and I'll probably bite. I'll probably take your topic and try it at least. But what I want to talk about today, it dovetails off of the topic yesterday. Yesterday I was talking a lot about public education and my objections to public education. And I mentioned, what we're doing as far as homeschooling. I was homeschooled. I've mentioned that in some of my previous videos. My kids are homeschooled. Our intention, our commitment is to, barring some catastrophe or something completely out of our control, our commitment is to homeschooling our kids all the way on up. And, I want to talk a little bit more today, not just about homeschooling, because I don't think you can just change that one area of your life, change your thinking. It really requires, in order to do homeschooling and to approach that with confidence, you have to have a philosophical shift. And you need to change your thinking about life and about yourself and what you're capable of. And so anyway, that's what I want to talk about a little bit more today. I'm really excited about it, actually. I started, this is the most organized I've gotten so far. All the other videos have been, by and large, winging it. And, I might, and in a couple of cases, I opened up a Word document and I wrote out, I think for Mother's Day, I wrote out, I want to hit this topic, this topic, this topic, this topic. But it was one line, and that was my outline. And in this case, I've got it more fleshed out. It looks more like the beginnings of an article for the blog, and maybe that's more appropriate. We'll see how it goes. This video may not be any shorter, but it may feel shorter if I have less hemming and hawing, and I flow from one point to the next, and then you can follow as a viewer or as a listener. I've got several people that have mentioned that they would like me to do a podcast, and I'm really wanting to do a podcast. I don't know how to do it. This is pretty easy. I just take a video on my phone, and then I can upload that to YouTube. I need to do some research and ask some people, how do you actually go about creating a podcast? But a number of people have said that if I had a podcast, I'd be more likely to actually have listeners, because it's easier to just download your podcast or stream it on your phone, to play that through your speakers, play that through your earbuds while you're mowing the yard, or you're driving someplace, or what have you, working out. And so I'm still I want to do that. I'm interested in doing that, and maybe as I go in that direction, I have hour-long podcasts and shorter, 10-15 minute videos like this. I don't want to do away with the videos. One of the things about doing these videos is I talk a lot with my hands. You may notice that. In all of the thumbnails that come up when I upload these videos to YouTube, it'll usually have 3 options for thumbnails, where I don't know how it pulls it from the video, but pulls it from the video at random points, I guess. And you pick one of those 3. And I think without fail, every video, the thumbnails are all of me with my hands in these weird positions, because they're always up. Chances are, 9 out of 10 that any little split second of a video that it would try and grab as a thumbnail, I'm gonna be talking with my hands. And if you do a podcast where people can only hear you, that you don't have the visual aids. This is my sign language where I'm gesticulating all the time, and it's not on purpose. If it's distracting, maybe podcasts. That's why people are asking for podcasts. But anyway, I don't know. Maybe for some people it would be a service if I had what I'm saying in a place where you can't see me. But anyway, I did this video about the red line on public education, and I was pretty pointed. I try to review my own thoughts, and even though I winged it, I was being very intentional in what I said, and I tried to slow down, not rush it. Obviously, an hour and 9 minutes, I'm not rushing it. But, all of the things that I was saying in that video, things I've been thinking about and trying to figure out a better and better way to articulate for several years, because your emotions are so high on education. We love our children, we want what's best for them, and you make a decision, and you hope you made the right decision. And somebody then comes in and they start criticizing that or questioning that or undermining that, telling you made the wrong call on a really fundamental level on something, and who knows, maybe you made the wrong call and your kids are already through school and now they're moved on to their life and they're living out the childhood you gave them. Maybe they're halfway through and boy, you're invested now, and how do you extricate yourself? It's messy. It's not as clean and easy as here I'm making it sound, because I was homeschooled from little on up. And we decided to homeschool from little on up. And I didn't have to have these hard conversations with people who, hey, I heard you guys aren't coming back next year. What's up with that? So there's challenges. I don't pretend to know how best to navigate all of those challenges from personal experience, but I've articulated what I said in that video in many different ways over the years, with mixed success from the standpoint of people continuing to be my friend. Some people, you tell them, the public education system is broken in this country, and they say thank you. And I had one couple that I know and respect from Glendive, Montana. We used to go to church with them. They said, thank you, well said, to my video from yesterday. And usually my remarks on public education, critical of it, are well received with people that have also chosen to homeschool, because they see it too. That's why they chose to homeschool, probably. But when you get parents, especially parents who are being told, and for all intents and purposes, I would agree that they are doing a good job, and then you come in and you say that the system you're giving your children to is not trustworthy. This is not a good decision. You should not be doing that. Do not depend on that system to instruct and educate your children. You tell them that, and you are touching a very sensitive nerve. And so it's not that I do not believe that is a reason to not talk about it. Anybody who thinks that we should just leave it well enough alone, you're smoking something, and it's probably your drug of choice there is moral cowardice. I'm sorry, you don't want to talk about education because people are going to get upset, even as children are being educated in godlessness. You're being a coward. I don't respect that. If you disagree with me, you want to discuss it, you want to say, hey, this is what I think, for a reason why it's not as bad as all that, it's not as bad as you're making it out to be, or whatever. Okay, great. You're not a moral coward. But if you're going to say, whether you agree with me or not, let's not talk about that, because it's going to upset people. Sorry, try again. Why do we need other people's approval? Why do we need to hold back our opinions and not have our views and our values communicated if they're going to upset other people? Or if we're not sure they're going to be well received. This video blog, there's no guarantee that this is going to be successful. And what is success anyways? If success is, these friends of mine that are messaging me and they're being helpful and saying, a podcast would be much more likely to have a wide audience because it's easier to sit and listen, or to not to sit and listen, but to walk around and listen. Easier than sitting and watching a video for an hour. Who's going to sit for an hour? I will say, if you've got some kind of a casting feature on your phone, your computer, where you have a smart TV, we did this last night. I wanted to watch this most recent video with my dad, and so my computer is on the same network as my smart TV in our living room. Oh, thank you very much.
Dad.
Yeah, this is Daniel.
Hi.
He just gave me a donut. And there's Enoch. Right here. Daniel, Enoch. And donut. The donut is not my son. No. My kids think I'm funny sometimes. No, my computer is on the same network as my smart TV, and my phone too. I can cast. I can pull up YouTube on my phone or on my computer, and then I can start playing the video, and then I can cast it to the TV, and then we can sit in the living room, sit on the couch, and watch it. We were gonna watch Dick Van Dyke on Netflix last night, and then we ended up watching my hour-long, hour 9-minute, 49-second video on public education and home education. And so anyway, you could do it that way. People watch hour-long programming all the time. The challenge for me may not be to take my messaging and my communique to a different format. The mission for me might be to just make this more interesting on the current format, because I talk with my hands, and I like this. Now that I've started doing it, I like this over blogging, for the sake of being able to convey things with meaningful pauses and facial expressions and body language. And I can wear a t-shirt like "Y'all need Jesus," and then convey something through that too. Anyway, let's dive right in. I'm talking about your donut. You don't need a pacifier, son. You're a big boy. Oh, you found another one. You don't need that pacifier. You don't need that pacifier. Yeah, thank you.
3 more.
Oh my goodness, thank you. Okay.
Because I bet you'll be hungry more.
Those are small donuts. I think I am hungrier than one small donut. Okay. All right. That's okay. That's enough. Okay. Moving on. I'm being genuine. You wouldn't catch that in the podcast. You would just hear all this noise. And now you get to see my adorable children milling about and being themselves. So the topic for today, if I didn't say so already, is do it yourself. And I did the recent video on home education. That's a DIY childhood education. Do it yourself. You don't need a teaching degree. You don't need the public education system. Your children really don't need to be taught to be godless. Another one. Here's gonna blow some people's minds. We've got these six kids with a seventh on the way, and 3 of those children have been born in hospitals, and 3 of them have not. Which is to say, 3 of them have been born at home. Which is to say, if you didn't think we were crazy before for having all these children and for homeschooling, odds have just gone up significantly that you think we're crazy, because we also have home births, and we've had 3 of those home births, 3 out of 3 on purpose. Now, I want to qualify that. If your wife or you as a mother, if you're pregnant and you're planning to have a delivery and it looks like you have a high risk for complications, a risk to your health and the baby's health, I do not look down on you at all for going to the hospital. Our last delivery, my wife's last delivery, Enoch Theophilus, he stalled out, labor stalled out. It dragged on and on and on. She couldn't eat. She couldn't keep fluids down. She got dehydrated. She got very weak, and it wasn't happening. And I was worried for her. And we wanted to have a home birth. We had a midwife hired. Hi, Julia. Really nice gal. Was there for Evelyn and Enoch both. We had a midwife, and my wife wanted to have a home birth, and I said, you know what, there's no shame in us just going to the hospital. So we went to Miles City. That's where my wife goes for prenatal appointments. There's Dr. Gallo there, who's a really nice gal. Really like her. Probably one of my favorite doctors I've ever met. Very good bedside manner, just really easy to get along with. And so we had a hospital birth with Enoch. We weren't planning on that, but we did. And the people at the hospital there in Miles City were super nice, and it was a good experience. We had our first 2 boys. They were born in hospitals in Dayton, Ohio. And that's what we thought. We thought, hey, you have a baby, that's where you go. You go to the hospital to do that. And you need somebody who has this big fancy degree, and they are more qualified than you, because it's scary. We've never had a baby before. Never been present for anybody having a baby before. I don't know, it's just, I don't know what we're gonna do. And so we went and looked for experts, sought the experts to guide us through that. And then you have this baby, and my wife, she wanted to go natural, didn't want an epidural. She's has a thing about needles, and I had read some horror stories about women who have back problems for the rest of their lives if that epidural is not administered properly. And she was concerned about the painkillers and whatnot getting into milk supply, getting into the baby's system. And so she wanted to go all natural, and basically we came into the hospital, and the hospital was like, well, we don't know what that looks like. We're not used to seeing people come in and wanting an all natural birth. We don't. Do you mind if we bring in the staff here that are interns, medical school interns, to observe this, because we've never heard of that before. I remember all these women want epidurals and C-sections, and just looked at my wife like she had 3 heads. So that was weird, and she had both deliveries, both Josiah and Eli. No problems, no issues whatsoever, easy as pie. With Eli, the doctor didn't even get there in time, And so it's just me and the nurse, and my wife delivered, and the nurse is saying, oh, let's wait for the doctor. And I'm just thinking to myself, why? Why wait for the doctor? I mean, what does that guy even do? I mean, unless there's an emergency. If there's an emergency, I'm glad you're here because, we need you. But unless there's an emergency, my wife's doing all the work. I'm not even doing anything. I contributed early in the process, and I have run out to the grocery store or Meadowlark here if she's had a craving for a certain food during this past 8 months or what have you. But she's doing all the work. Her body, God made her body to be able to do that. And what? I don't know what you just said. Are you looking for a pacifier? Anyway, we had, after our first 2, we had our next 3 at home on purpose. And one of them we had 2 midwives, and they showed up half an hour late. Hi, Nina and Audra, midwives from Columbus, Ohio. They were over an hour away. And my wife went into labor early in the morning. It was like 4:30 in the morning. And she was hesitant to call them in case it was false labor and have them come all that way for nothing. And so, we ended up delivering the baby on our own with no midwives there until after the process. And I'd had a chance to kind of clean up things a little bit. And after that, I said, why do we even need midwives? Like, I mean, they did, obviously, they didn't make it in time, and we did all right, like we did it. And so my wife was leery. She was, no, I still want midwives. I would just feel more comfortable. And so I'm like, okay, fine, I don't want to push too hard on that. I mean, it's her body, her choice, right? We went to our first appointment with them when she was pregnant with Daniel. And the midwives were like, hey, you guys did such a great job with delivering Solomon on your own, unassisted. Have you thought about just going unassisted with Daniel? And then Lauren's like, oh, yeah, well, I guess we could do that. It sounds reasonable. And it was reasonable when they mentioned the idea. That wasn't. Anyway, I give my wife a hard time about that. We ended up having Daniel at home, unassisted. We had a gal from church who came and watched our kids. I think she watched them downstairs while we were upstairs having a baby. And I have caught my children as they come out. I'm there for the delivery process. You men who don't even want to be in the room. And unless it's a C-section. If it's a C-section, you don't want to be in the room as your wife is giving birth. Okay. I've never done that, and that would be hard to have somebody, doing an incision. But if it's a natural birth and you're not there, why? I mean, just man up. If that offends you, so what? I don't care. Like, man up again. Like, double down on that. Suck it up. So I want to make something clear too. I mean, the home education, the philosophy that we can do that ourselves. We don't need an expert to raise our kids, to teach our kids. This is a process that, biblically speaking, according to our belief in the God of the Bible and what the Bible says as God's revealed word, we believe that the process of teaching our children is our responsibility, that God calls us to do it. He gave us that responsibility, and we are able to do it. And so we have taken the initiative and done it, and are doing it. Did you take that away from your brother? Did you? we are doing it. And with home births, I don't see why not extend that philosophy to the next step, or to the preceding step, for that matter. You have the baby at home. Why not? Why do you need to go to the hospital and have a baby unless there's an emergency? I don't wake up in the morning before I've had my cup of coffee and just go to the hospital and just say, hey, like, I think I got this, but just in case, watch me, hook me up to a monitor before I take my drink of coffee here, make sure I do it right. No, if I have an issue with not being able to swallow things because I got a giant hole in my neck or something like that, coffee's just coming out. Okay, great. Call the ambulance, take me in. But I think I'm all right, and unless evidence to the contrary presents itself, I'm gonna be home and paddle my own canoe. So home births, if you ever have any questions about that you want to ask, I'm a pretty open book. It's been meaningful to me to be there for the birth of all of my children, to catch my children, to cut the umbilical cord. It's weird. Cutting an umbilical cord is the weirdest part of the process. And it is an experience like no other to be present for the delivery of a child. For any husband, father who's not been there for that, and you're squeamish about it, again, man up. But I'll tell you what. I mean, you see your wife in an entirely different respect, and for some guys, that's why they don't want to do it, because they don't want the mystique to be ruined. But I have such a profound respect for the way the brave, strong way that my wife approaches childbirth, and she is I think it's wonderful. I think she's wonderful, and it's great. And moving on. I've talked about what we're doing right now. I've talked about what we have done in the past, and I want to talk about our plans for the future. And so I believe in independence. I like the do-it-yourself mentality. I'm a huge fan of self-government. That's what conservatism means to me. Self-government means I am in charge of me. You do you, I do me, and we leave each other free as much as possible to govern ourselves. I believe we are capable of governing ourselves. I believe that, biblically speaking, it is appropriate that man be in charge of himself. One of the fruits of the Spirit is self-control. And there's exceptions, and there's also stuff in there about submission to godly authorities, submission in love to one another, and all that. But even the submission is an act of self-control. You are in control of yourself. And God did not give me a brain just so that you could do all my thinking for me. He didn't give you a brain so that I could do all your thinking for you. And this video, don't take this video the wrong way. Don't take any of my videos or anything I'm writing or anything I say the wrong way. I'm not trying to do your thinking for you, but I am trying to be the change I want to see in the world, very much so, and I intend to keep on doing that. And maybe some of it will stick and rub off on you, and we'll have a great conversation, I hope, whether you like what I say or you don't, if you agree, if you disagree. That'll iron sharpens iron, as one man to another, iron sharpens iron. But I've got all these boards on Pinterest. Home exterior, 3 sections, 1,521 pins. Home interior, 8 sections, 3,116 pins. Garage and workshop, 2 sections, 268 pins. House is a joint board that I've got with my wife. She's got Pinterest, I've got Pinterest. And I think even just one of my boards has more pins in it than I've got. I've got how many here? It's tons, like 38 or 40 boards or something like that. Most of them have more pins than her entire Pinterest account does. Mostly because she'll see stuff she likes and she clicks through and she doesn't necessarily pin, which I don't understand. She'll say, "Oh, I like that." I'm like, "Why don't you pin it? And then you can like it in the future too when you come back and you look at it again." Nah, whatever. She does her, I do me. I've got these huge boards. Taken together. What is that? 4,500. Almost 5,000 pins, probably about 5,000 pins, just for pins about just for home design, the inside, the outside, the outbuildings. Something I'm really interested in is architecture, layout, being intentional with your space, and someday, God willing. I would like to have the time and the money to be able to design a custom home that is, it fits like a glove what our family wants and what our family needs. I'd like to put it on some acreage out in the country. I'd like to have, hills and trees. I'd like to have a nice big garden for my wife and kids to do. I'm not much for gardening. They enjoy it, but I'd like them to have a good space for gardening. I'd like to have chicken coop and some dairy goats, because goat cheese. If we can grow our own spinach, and we can grow and we can raise our own dairy goats and make goat cheese and cook the spinach with the goat cheese. Oh my goodness! If you've never tried that, sautéed in olive oil, it's fantastic. Part of my favorite meal. My wife, every time she asks me, "Hey, what do you want for supper?" That and venison tacos. She makes these Greek venison tacos with tzatzukos. I don't remember how you say it. But they're Greek tacos in pita bread, flatbread, with venison. It's all chopped up, and it is, man. The food in heaven. I can only imagine it being as good. I can't imagine it being better. But I've got all these pins where I want to do that myself. I want to design, and I'm not an architect. I'm not an engineer. I have a good friend, a good family friend. His kids are friends with my kids. His wife is friends with my wife. He and I are friends. We serve on the board together at church. I'm coaching I just was coaching 2 of his sons in soccer, and he's somebody that I could talk with. I plan to, by the way, Buck. Just so you know, if this ever happens, I'm coming to you. I want you to help me design and build my house. If we win the lottery that I don't play, or whatever. But I want to have this individual, unique house that fits us, our personality, our desires, our ambitions, our plans for the future. And with all these kids, it needs to be special. We're doing things that not everybody's doing. We intend to do things that not everybody's doing, and I want a space. I want to be intentional with a space that fits our purposes and facilitates that and serves
Messiah,
us.
no
And
before church.
So, yeah, it's a Sunday Sunday morning before church.
And no electronics before church.
Except for my
YouTube
computer
video.
and my smartphone that I'm taking a YouTube video on.
That's the only electronics he can use. It's a big bum for us kids.
It's a big bum.
Because how you gotta do something on electronics, but we don't. Yeah.
Hey, why don't you go get some breakfast?
I did.
Oh, you did?
Yep.
This morning?
Yep. It's donuts.
Oh, that's right.
Little
Yep.
donuts.
Sorry, did you get any donuts?
Yep. 2.
Okay, all right.
Everybody got 2. It was only like 300 boards. Only like 6.
Can you accept it? Thank you. So, there's a verse I want to read, and this dovetails, and it's not that I pull this verse out as a way of underwriting what I've decided I want to do anyways. I read this verse several years ago, and it has been part of why I believe that being self-governing, self-sufficient, why that is a good thing, why that is a godly thing, why that's appropriate, why that's something that we should aspire to. And it's it fits with the Christian worldview, it fits with our convictions and our beliefs. 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, verses 9 through 12, Paul's writing. He says, "Now concerning brotherly love, you have no need for anyone to write to you, for you yourselves have been taught by God to love one another. For that indeed is what you are doing to all the brothers throughout Macedonia." "But we urge you, brothers, to do this more and more, and to aspire to live quietly, to mind your own affairs, to work with your hands, as we instructed you, so that you may walk properly before outsiders and be dependent on no one." Yeah, I know you're in this one. Everybody knows you've got the longest guest appearance. My son Daniel's not shy. Anybody who knows him knows that's I could see him becoming some kind of a entrepreneur, politician, salesperson, very persuasive, very persistent, very charming, very much a people person. No, I mean, 1 Thessalonians 4, 9 through 12. "Aspire to live quietly, to mind your own affairs, to work with your hands, as we instructed you, so that you may walk properly before outsiders and be dependent on no one." Boy, that sounds nice. There's just that little bit there. That just encapsulates my... I'm being distracted here. It encapsulates my ambitions. That's what I want. I'm taking these YouTube videos talking about public education, and I'm talking about in my video about my son's name, it's John Lazarus we've picked out. I talked about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And I write about all these different things politically, socially, and my minding my own affairs. Well, I aspire to.
No electronics before church.
You okay?
Yeah, but Mommy kicked me right here.
Hey, you don't kick your sister.
I didn't. Someone kicked me, and then I accidentally hit her with my back.
Oh, okay. Well, how about we turn off the TV?
Yes. Remember, people.
Can you help her get some donuts?
Remember, people. Don't turn on electronics before church.
Can you help her get some donuts? Solomon. Guys, I'm trying to take a video right here, and you're disrupting it. This is all going to be on YouTube. Okay. Being real. I'm being authentic. for better or worse. To aspire to live quietly, to mind your own affairs, to work with your hands as we instructed you, so that you may walk properly before outsiders and be dependent on no one. You know, what does that mean? Be dependent on no one. You know, I like not depending on other people as much as possible. When you're in a pinch, you need help. You know, there's something you don't know how to do. You know, if I build this house, if I ever have the funds and the time to build this house, this custom house, I don't have the expertise necessarily on my own without help. And so it may be that I depend on my good friend Buck to help me fill in the gaps, to help instruct me. You know, maybe between now and that day that I can do the research, I can study it out, and help bridge some of that gap. But you know, being engaged, being involved in the process as much as possible, especially the first time around. You know, our first couple of sons, they were being born, and we went to the hospital, and we had the help of medical professionals. They hooked up. Hey Solomon, bring me your Kindle and turn off the TV, guys. I was very clear about that. Turn it off. Solomon, bring the Kindle here. I said it once. I've said it twice. Okay. Did you have donuts? Can you go pick out some clothes for church?
I got my clothes out for church.
Okay, well then go get some more food. Or get some cereal, or what have you. But can you, wait, okay. You guys are disrupting my video. I am doing, no, that's fine. I'm doing a video here, trying to talk about all this. Can you wait? Just go have some breakfast.
I did. And make sure Grandpa could watch this one so you could come over.
It will be, yes.
Come over for lunch. I want to tell Grandpa, come over to lunch for a day and then show him this one. And then I'll be in the video.
There are people who want you to be dependent on them. And not always when it's in your best interest. They want to be needed. They want to feel needed because that gives them a sense of purpose. And in general, wanting to be needed, wanting to serve a valuable purpose is a good thing. But it can take an ugly turn if your ratio of self-interest to care for others gets out of whack. And sometimes it does. You know, to go to the very extreme example, you know, on the one hand you've got dependence, on the other hand you've got independence. On the one hand you could say, I want to be self-governing. I want to be in a position where we grow our own food, we teach our own kids, we have our kids at home. We deliver our babies at home if possible, unless there's an emergency. We educate ourselves, we build our own house, design our own house, have our own process there. You know, I think for myself. That's one end of the spectrum. You know, and I study politics quite a bit. I read the news. I am aware of communism and Marxism and Nazism from a historical standpoint, from a philosophical standpoint. I'm also aware of the progressive agenda, the history of progressivism in the U.S., and that it is a march towards socialism. Bernie Sanders ran for president this last time around, and I do believe he should have won the Democratic primary. In terms of the rules, it was rigged against him and for Hillary Clinton. But he's an out-and-out socialist. You can call him a democratic socialist. No, socialist. Democracy, according to Marx, was just supposed to be an intermission between capitalism and communism. So he's a transitional form, is what he is. He's supposed to get society to take more and more of the bait that progressives have been trying to feed us for the past 100 years, with the hook sinking deeper and deeper and more hooks getting further and further in until we, as the big fish, can't extricate ourselves. We get hauled into the boat, carved up. And, if in a socialist country, in a communist country, in a centrally planned economy, the state owns the means of production, and what the fine print reads is that you are the means of production, and you are under the ownership of the state, because everything you say, think, do, feel, and are is governed and regulated by bureaucrats who need to make sure that you are meshing. You are a cog in the machine of the state, of society, of the community, and that you're doing your part and meeting the quotas and not taking more than your fair share. And I think Bernie Sanders is genuine, and I think a lot of these communists have been genuine. Not all of them, but I think a lot of them have been, and have thought that they were truly doing some good and noble thing by taking control of every aspect of your life. Let me find a quote from C.S. Lewis that really fits here. I hope I can find it quickly so that this doesn't become this long, drawn-out video of me just staring up at my computer. Maybe I won't find it in time. And there it is. Okay. All right. C.S. Lewis writes, "Of all tyrannies, a tyranny sincerely exercised for the good of its victims may be the most oppressive. It would be better to live under robber barons than under omnipotent moral busybodies. The robber baron's cruelty may sometimes sleep. His cupidity may at some point be satiated. But those who torment us for our own good will torment us without end, for they do so with the approval of their own conscience." And that's what I mean when I say some people want to be depended on, and they want us to be dependent on them, even when it's not at our best interest and it's not good for us. And we need to be careful about that and to resist that and to learn to say no. Thank you, but no. Help is not always helpful. Help is harmful when it creates dependency, where you didn't need you didn't need to be the man given a fish. You needed to be the man who was taught how to fish, so that you could be fed for a lifetime. I'm reading this book. It's Jordan Peterson's latest 12 Simple Rules for Life, An Antidote to Chaos. And in reading his book, I'm just a couple chapters in, he talks quite a bit about evolutionary psychology. And I don't agree with, any time I hear the term millions of years, I say, well, there's no such thing. There's never been millions of years in the history of biology and mankind and the animals and the phytoplankton or whatever. Millions of years doesn't exist. That's just a phrase that's thrown about as an abracadabra to make whatever challenges of the laws of nature disappear. Millions of years. Okay, now you don't have to ask this question about how did that happen? How does that work? And so, Jordan Peterson, he's a clinical psychologist, smart man, professor. And he is talking about the way that animals assert dominance and are territorial, and the way that they compete for mates and breeding and all that. He talks about lobsters and lobster brains and the hormones that are secreted in victory when one lobster is able to conquer another lobster, take his territory. Serotonin is released in the lobster brain, and that serotonin makes the lobster feel good. He's ooh, yeah, struts, and he's got his big pincers up, but he's the big lobster, and everybody needs to know it. Meanwhile, the lobster that's been defeated experiences an opposite effect, and the hormones that are released. Here you go, my donuts. The hormones that are released or not released in the case of the defeated lobster cause the posture of the defeated lobster to shrivel up, and they look defeated because they are defeated. The lobster loses self-confidence, and then he says all the time when he's taking YouTube videos for his video blogging, and But Peterson, he talks about 300 million years. That's how long lobsters have been around, or whatever. Supposedly, they have no way of knowing that. It's a fabrication. But I like the way Jordan Peterson thinks, even though we disagree. I like that he has the guts to say what he thinks. And you've got all these people that are trying to bring him on and interview him in these different contexts and ask him to denounce Donald Trump, and all these liberals, these manipulative leftists who want to turn everything good into something microaggressive and horrible, and they're accusing him of being this champion of patriarchy. Well, good. We need more patriarchy. Actually, God made men to be leaders in their homes, leaders in the churches, leaders in communities, leaders in society. God made men to be leaders. It is an indictment on a society when the women have to step up to fill those roles. That is not a thing to be praised and lauded. You've got Deborah in the Bible, in the Old Testament, she's a judge, and all the feminists in the church always pull up Deborah. Well, Deborah was a judge. Deborah scolded Barak because Barak wanted Deborah along for the battle, wanted her to hold his hand so that he could go off. He was dependent on her when he should have been dependent on God. That should have been enough. He shouldn't have needed her approval, her support, in order to go fight that battle, because all he should have needed was go do it from God. So we need more patriarchy. That was an indictment on Barak. It was an indictment on the state of morality, of masculinity in Israel, that Deborah had to rise up and fill those shoes. It was an indictment on the country and on their culture. But Jordan Peterson, I like that he is speaking out against all this gender dysphoria. He's talking about gender as being distinct and being meaningful, and he's able to come at it with some convincing philosophical and psychological and scientific arguments. And he does so with boldness. That's what we need, is boldness, not this shrinking, defeated lobster slouching around being passive aggressive nonsense. And that's not how Jesus was. Christians, you know, it's a undermining of your worldview to go around apologizing and slinking around and being indirect and being passive. You know, how are you going to preach the gospel and have your testimony shared with other people, and then they don't even get the impression that you believe it, because you're undermining it and you're qualifying it to such an extent it dies the death of 1,000 qualifications. And you're afraid. You're afraid of what it's going to do to you socially, to stand up and to believe these things, to say and do these things. You know, here's an argument for you may walk properly before outsiders and be dependent on no one. An argument for that is when you're dependent on people, especially in an ungodly world that is increasingly in our nation anti-Christian, hostile to Christian faith, hostile to Christian doctrine, hostile to Christian ways of thinking and relating and living. When you're dependent on others and you upset them, all of a sudden they can withdraw their support, and they can punish you, and they can bring you to heel. You know, oh, you're grounded. You're fired. We're going to remove tenure. We're going to demote you. We're going to transfer you to a different position. We're going to not hire you to begin with. We're going to, whatever. If you're a kid in college and you write a paper, speaking from your Christian worldview, and you take a position on an issue that is not politically correct, and your professor, your teacher, is a social activist, and they have taken it as their mission to root out the patriarchy and to root out sexism and bigotry and homophobia and Islamophobia and all these other things that don't exist, that are I should say they don't exist as a threat relative to these leftist moves against them, which see them as bogeymen, as McCarthyism, just pointing accusing fingers at anybody that disagrees with or challenges the leftists, calling them these things, falsely accusing them, so that they go away, so that they can be destroyed. You dehumanize them, you make them ridiculous, so that you can destroy. Whom the gods want to destroy, they first make ridiculous. And I'm glad Peterson's saying something about it. Christians, we need to say something about it. I think Donald Trump getting into office and becoming somebody who's so pro-life, doing something with courage, having the courage to move the American embassy to Jerusalem finally, is long overdue. Several of our past presidents have promised to do it and then not, and then just chickened out. And if they were cleaner cut and more well respected, should they have been? Was it all a carefully crafted image, meant to deceive us, meant to take us in and trick us, hide their lack of moral clarity, their lack of courage? They were clean cut, but it was a front to cover for their more fundamental deficiencies. If something can be done about abortion, there was an article the other day. I think it was an NBC News, and they of course put their spin on it. Trump is considering or has made moves to issue an executive order which would force Planned Parenthood to choose between either providing abortions under the same roof as other services or receiving federal funding, as they have been for many years. And it is against the law that they would perform abortions with federal funding, and yet the Democrats, the evil party in America, the party that's consistently on the side of evil and against goodness and truth. The Democrats have insisted that Planned Parenthood is this noble organization that is for women's health and family planning. We have to support that. We have to underwrite that. and what it is it is an organization which has as its business model murder of the most innocent among us. And it profits off the sale of their bodies for medical research.